Hey all, Rich Basil here again. I want to kind of show you one of my favorite flies for streamer fishing. I do a reasonable amount of streamer fishing now. We're heading down to Chile in a few weeks, and I've used this pattern in Argentina. I've used this pattern in Kamchatka and Alaska, and it really seems to catch a lot of fish. I've been kind of fishing similar patterns for a long time. And one of the problems that I had originally is that we had just one hook up front, and I noticed that with these streamer patterns a lot of the fish would just grab the tail, so we added a little stinger hook on here with a string technique, and I'll kind of show you how that works, and that really has increased the hookup rate. Now you do have to check your local regulations and make sure that you can have two hooks. If you can't, cut off the front hook and just use the back hook if there's only a single hook restriction in where you're fishing. You can tie these up in lots of different colors. I usually tie them up in 3 or 4 different colors depending on the water clarity. The darker the water, the more turbid the water, the darker the color fly I like. So in really clear water you can get away with some of these lighter colors. But in darker water, cloudy water, you want actually a darker fly if you believe our bass fishing friends. So let's show you kind of how to tie this fly up. We're going to start with just a long streamer hook. And actually, before I do that, I need to get my little cone heads. There we go. So we're going to get our little cone heads. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to get something else too. Alright. So when you're throwing streamers around, especially on a boat with a lot of other people, you want to get rid of the barbs. So we're going to crush down the barbs on these hooks. And I like to fish barbless most of the time anyway. And then we're going to add a little cone head to this. And this is just, I don't know if you can see that. They're the size small cone heads. Wapsi makes these. Lots of other companies do too. These are not really heavily weighted. You can get lead ones if you want something that's a little heavier. And we're going to put this on our vise. And we're just going to then take some thread. And I like the 140 denier thread for this. You need to be able to pull down later on pretty tight, so the 70 denier thread tends to break. I usually tie everything else with my 70 denier thread. We'll just start wrapping some thread in here. Stop right about there for now. Okay, so now kind of the tricky part of this whole thing. Here is a little piece of rabbit fur, and this one is actually a crayfish pattern with little black barbs on it, and you can, like I said, you can tie this any color. I just wanted to use this one just for demo purposes, so it's a little bit lighter. And in order to add this little stinger hook to the back, the easiest way to do that is to take your bodkin or any kind of needle and drive it through the tail like that, and that creates a little hole that you then can use to thread your hook. And then in the line of hooks, all different kinds of hooks you can use. My favorite kind of stinger hooks for these are these little mosquito hooks made by Owner. You buy these in the bass fishing section of the store. You can order them online, of course, but you can get in size 6 or size 8. This is a size 8 nymph hook, so usually you'll go with a size 8 stinger hook also, depending upon what size you're going to tie it. I ran out of these, so my package is empty, so I'm just taking a 10 hook, but let me show you really before how these look. Most of these stinger hooks have this kind of a shape to them, where they have a little bit of an upturned eye, and this allows you to sit this right in the leather part of that rabbit fur, and when you tie that in, the hook rides off the end of the fly nice. So for now though, I'm just going to use a little 10 hook for this fly, just because I'm all out. And we're going to take this out. And get that through there. And again, I made this barbless already. And we're just going to kind of push that in through the eye, through that little hole there. I don't know if you can see that. So that the hook hangs out the end and the eye is kind of just coming right through the end of the fly. And this is the end with the tail on it. So we can reposition this hook a little bit later on, but that's basically what that's going to look like. Then we're going to get our string part of this, and this string I use is just some backing. So you can get any kind of backing you want, any color. This just happened to be what I had around here. And we're going to cut off a section of backing. And then string that through my hook. So I'm just going to string it through and just kind of loop it back a little bit so that these lengths are about even. Something like that. Okay. Then, again, a little bit of the tricky part is we're going to lay this on here, and we're going to try and position it where we think that tail end should be. And you know, this string is going to be moving off this tail, so we want to have enough, depending upon how long you want to make your fly, you can adjust this length back and forth, and it just kind of, and you can adjust it on the you know, as you do this fly. So somewhere about 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch off the back is going to be good for this. And I'm just going to guess right there for now. And we'll just tie this in then up front. I make a couple of wraps and adjust it so that the strings stay on top. And I wrap forward, turn these guys back, and wrap backwards so that they lock in there pretty tight. And I'm giving a pretty good amount of tension because I really want to get these wraps on there pretty tight. And then we're going to cut off this tag part. And if you have sharp scissors, it's helpful. These ones have really seen the day. That gel spun stuff's hard to cut through. Then kind of position it, pull it a little bit tight. And then I like to kind of actually spread the threads so that so you have one thread kind of on either side of the shank of the hook. And then just kind of tie it on back. To about where the curve starts, something like that. Okay. Now I do like to take a little super glue here and just reinforce that to make sure that that stays down tight. So we'll just put a little dab of super glue on there and spread that around just to kind of get all those fibers to stick nicely. Alright, so the next thing is to take a little chenille, and you can use any color chenille. I'm just going to use this kind of yellowish chenille for this, and cut off a piece. And We're going to tie this in right there on the end. And again, come back to about where you stopped before. And then bring this line all the way up. It doesn't have to be really fancy. And I'm leaving specifically a little gap here because we're going to tie in a bunch of stuff up front in a minute. So, and then what we're going to do is wrap this forward. Get this out of my way. And again, you can use the rotary function for your vise if you wish. I'm just going to pull it forward about 7-8 wraps or so, just kind of covering up that section that I was. All right. And we'll cut that off. And just clean that up a bit. Then I'm going to take my thread and just loosely wrap this back, not tight, just because I want to get back to the tail of the fly. And right about kind of just past where the hook starts, I'm going to kind of drop my line down. And then we're going to take this rabbit fur and lay this over the top. And again, tricky part again. So we want to just kind of get our tail straight. Kind of sometimes helps to kind of grab the hook and just size this up a bit. Kind of see where you need to be. So then I'm going to take my little bodkin again and just kind of flip these little hairs forward to find a tie-in point here. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it really helps to kind of clean out some of those little fuzzes. Alright, that looks pretty good. So then I'm going to do 2 wraps just to kind of tighten that down. Pull this forward and do another 2 wraps to lock that in. Then I'm going to come up about mid-body on this, and we're going to do that again. So again, just kind of hold it about where you think it should be. Get your little bodkin to get in there and clean up the fuzz. And that creates another tie-in spot for you. Again, about 2 wraps, try and keep it on top. 2 wraps there, and then come just a little bit more forward. Again, leaving enough room at the front so and we're going to kind of see where we need to be. And here I just cut this off. It's not really too critical, but you just want to leave a little nub in there so you can then tie into, want to catch those at that leather part and then just kind of really kind of tie that in nice. And you have to kind of build up a little edge here. Okay, so there's our fly tied in. Ow! Be careful of that hook. So then, next thing is I like to take a little crystal flash, and this is just some black crystal flash. Again, you can use any color. So we're going to take a few fibers of this black crystal flash. And we're going to lay this kind of on that side, tie it in, sweep it around and lay it on the other side, tie it in. Again, I like to come back and catch it just on the sides there, get it positioned right. That stinger hook really does work, let me tell you. Okay. All right. Something like that. Alright, then the really fun part of this, which is a little bit more complicated, is to create the collar on this. And for this, I'm going to be using X Caddis natural dark deer fur, and we're going to use this to create our collar. And if you haven't seen anything online yet about these clamps made by Swiss CDC, this is the Swiss CDC clamp. I'm going to be using this to create this fly collar. And what we do is we take our fur, and then you can come right in with the clamp right along the edge here and kind of grab a cluster of this fur. It's hard to do. I'm going to lay this down and show you kind of once I do it what it looks like. Okay, so there I've grabbed a clump of this in my clamp, I guess you can see, and then we're going to use our scissors to just cut that off. And we create this clamp full of these deer hairs. It's really kind of cool. I like to have these edges be about a 1/4 inch or so out. Okay, so that's kind of what that's going to look like. Get these guys out of here. And we're going to create a dubbing loop then. But before I do that, I've tried this before. I'm going to get rid of some of these long crystal flashes just because they get tied in when you start doing this dubbing loop. So I'm just going to cut these off where I want them. And then we're going to create a dubbing loop. And it has to be big enough for the clamp to fit in. Something like that. I'm just going to do one loop around here just to kind of get it tight. There we go. Alright, and then the next thing is to hang this from a spinner, and you can use any kind of spinner. This happens to be just one by Loon. You should keep your finger in there. And then take your, and again, this doesn't have to be perfect. Take your stacked fur, and we're just going to stick the whole clamp into the loop, kind of drop it, and then just come back. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. It's a little hard. See what I'm doing? I got the hairs all in that loop, and I'm just going to release my clamp all the way, and that way all my hairs stay stacked up nice in there like that. And this is kind of the tricky fun part, but you got to then now start spinning this to create your brush. And I made my loop a little bit small. Normally I should be able to just hang this down and spin it, but as you can see, as I'm spinning this, those hairs just really brush up really nice and create this nice dense brush of deer hair. I could have used my loop a little bit longer, but that's okay. So spin it up nice, get all those hairs kind of brushed up really nice, something like that. Okay, and then what we're going to do is kind of start wrapping And I'll probably make my first wrap right to where the rabbit fur starts, to cover up this section, and then I'm going to start wrapping a little bit forward after that. Try not to catch in your other things, and then as you go, kind of pull these back and keep wrapping forward. And just kind of pull back those little hairs and keep wrapping forward. And again, depends on how big a head you want. You could probably stop there. In fact, I'm going to. And then I'm just going to come in and tie this off. And hold tension on my line and clip out this other part. Alright, so there's our collar. Really kind of cool. So now again, sweep back, and then what I like to do is come back and pinch all these guys back and get them going backwards a little bit more. So moderate tension on your string. And you want about an 1/8 inch here to put on a little collar here later on too. So something like that looks good. Alright, so now we got everything pretty much tied in, except for I just want to add a little collar here up front, and for this I'm going to use a little ice dub in shrimp pink. You can use any color again. I just happen to like this color combination. It looks cool. So we'll take a little bit of this, and you actually kind of want to have this a little bit semi-fluffy. You don't want to have it too tight. You can always add more later, so I'll take a little bit off. So something like that. And again, pull back these fibers, and we're going to wrap back towards that deer hair. Create our little collar, and then we'll come up front and pretty much just whip finish it and be done. That's not going to come undone. Okay. So we got a few little flyers here that you can just cut out of the collar. It always happens when you're dealing with deer hair. It's hard to control every little last one. And then what I actually like to do is to come in here underneath and get rid of these guys, but not clip out my crystal flash. So they're just going to come in here and just kind of get rid of all this stuff on the bottom. I got one little crystal flash that's a little low on this fly. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect, but something like that. So there's your fly, and the stinger hook's back here. I've already grabbed it a few times myself during this fishing expedition. So you can see right there's the stinger hook in this tail. This tail can move nicely with that string. So that string underbody, I'll turn it towards you. That's kind of where that string attaches, so it's not stiff, it's not a wire. That hook can move and get a lot of good hookups that way. Will not pull out with the way we tied that in. And again, if your regulations say that you can't fish 2 hooks, then just come in here with a big pair of clippers and clip out this front hook. But that's pretty much it, and that'll fish really nice. If you want to add weight to it, you can use a lead head. You can also put some lead wraps on before you tie on your chenille. That's a great way to add a little extra weight. But that's kind of what it looks like, and hopefully you guys give this a try and enjoy. Hey, I forgot to mention one thing with this fly. A combination that really works well also, that I caught a whole bunch of fish on over in Kamchatka. If you take one of these little plastic 6mm beads and put it right in front of the eye of the hook on your line, you don't have to actually tie it into the fly because these little beads are actually hard to get around the hook. But if you take this on your fly line and peg it over your knot, kind of right there, and fish it that way, really caught a ton of fish on that. They really seemed to like it. I don't know if they thought that something was running around with a salmon egg in its mouth and kind of like an egg sucking leech, but that caught a ton of fish, and it doesn't add much weight. So if you're throwing relatively light line, you can really sweep the water with that. It really works great. So give that a try also. These come in different colors. You can get all different colors. And these are, again, just beads that I bought at Bass Pro Shops, and they work great for this purpose. Just peg it right on your line. You can either use a toothpick, or they make these little plastic egg pegs that I use, and that's a great combination for this fly. Give it a try.